Well, here we are again, folks. This is Brother Peter with tidbits from the Word. As life has enhanced my ability to read, at the age of 30, when I got saved, I had not the ability to know how to read. I still have problem with many words because of my inability to understand the way they sound as they are said. But the Lord has brought across my path many books. I like to, after reading The Mountains of Spices by Hannah Hurnard, by reading this, I have seen the gentle breezes of the Lord bringing across my path many, many good writings of people. People with, all of us in one sense of the word, have a physical seeing thing. We can see the physics of a person. But we do not always see the emotions. We don't always see the intellect. We don't always see the inner intelligence. We don't always see the inner spirit and what comes out of a person. Out of many, many, many books I have, and I have a lot of books, and I read a lot of things. And I read a lot of so-called intelligent minds who do not possess what this Miss Hannah possessed. She possessed the ability to put an allegory together with truth. And by doing that, the gentle breezes of her work will blow through your heart and your mind. Will give you the fact of an atonement made with love. She brings the grace of God and mercy of God. She brings it forward and the glory of God with words that are not biblical, but yet have a biblical essence. When she speaks of the King of glory and grace upon the mountain, and the King of peace, the King of love. This King is only one King like that, and that is the God of heaven. And so she is bringing forth in the nature of our being in our world, she's bringing forth the allegory or the essence of the whole matter. As we said in one that we saw before, the gentle breezes of God are what moves the air around the world. If the breezes were to not blow, there would be no air in many places in the world. Because air is made by trees, and where there's no trees for miles and miles and miles, like on a desert, the air has to blow over there. So next to the 9 mountains of spices that she's been talking about is the King of grace and glory, which is a mountain of Spikenard, or peace. On the slopes of this mountain grew a special variety of shrub, requiring a high altitude for above the mist and the cloud, which so often shrouded the lower slopes of the mountain. The King Spikenard could be produced nowhere else in the world, but it grew in the wonderful abundance up there on the high places. It was from this lovely medicine plant that he produced the famous balsam of peace, a great balm for all restlessness and pain and fever. It was extracted from the root and the shrub in the form of fragrant oil. All the inhabitants of the high places carried a supply of this balm with them, wherever they went, but especially on their visits to the valley below, anointing themselves with a daily grace and glory, was therefore delighted to see the actual shrubs from which it was produced, growing up there in such abundance that the whole mountainside was clothed with a forest of these lovely shrubs spinkered. Are you a spinkered shrub? Am I a spinkered shrub? Do I live close enough to God so that I'm above the clouds? Do I live close enough to the Lord that created this heaven and this earth that I am considered a peaceable person? That wherever I go or whenever somebody sees me coming, they see peace and they see grace and they see glory and they see mercy coming? Is that where I live? Do I live close enough to God that I'm in a high place? Wow. This is a beautiful allegory of what a Christian is supposed to look like. He's supposed to look like this shrub. His roots are embedded in God and in the Word so great that when he comes off the mountaintop into the valley, that he brings peace with him, that he brings what this plant has planted in him, what he didn't have for 30 years, and now he has. Develop it. To develop it. Let's see how we develop it. She, the Spikenard, discovered too that a great number of streams and brooks ran down the mountainside, into which the roots of the bushes penetrated, and from which they drew in the healing properties of peace and stored it up. The mountain of Spikenard was indeed a veritable garden of fountains, a well of living water, and streams of Lebanon. This lady quotes a verse of the container 415 of undoubtedly of the scroll in a container. The roots of the bushes thrust themselves down eagerly and thirstily into the water, along whose banks they grew, accepting and drinking up everything the stream could bring them. Nothing was rejected. All was accepted with joy. And after being drawn within, was there transformed into beauty and fragrance and healing balm. To you and I, who live under this Lord, the Lord of grace, the Lord of glory, the Lord of peace, the King of the mountain, the words that he has penned down in his book for you and I are the streams and the fountains, are the words that we are to drink from, are the words we are to pull up into our roots. And when we come off the mountain with these, we are to be to others a fresh drink of water, a fresh smell of peace. As they walked together amongst these bushes, the king spoke to grace and glory and explained to her the nature of the true peace, which can only be produced by acceptance with the joy of all the will of God permits to come to his people along the pathway of life, and of the streams of pleasure which sing as they leap down from the high places. I delight to do thy will, O God, O my God. So the streams of water, the soils that make them able to nourish the little trees of peace? And he taught her yet another mountain song. I wished I had my friend Debbie to play her violin while I read this piece. In acceptance lieth peace. In acceptance lieth peace. Wow. Oh, my heart, be still. Let thy restless worries cease, and accept his will. Though this test be not thy choice, it is his, therefore rejoice. It might not have been his choice, but it was his will, therefore rejoice. In his plan that cannot be, ought to make thee sad. If this is his choice for thee, take it and be glad. Make from it some lovely thing to the glory of thy King. Cease from sights and murmuring. Sing his lovely grace. This thing means thy furthering to a wealthy place. From thy fears he'll give release, and acceptance lieth peace. Wow. I have some friends. I have a lot of friends who have lost a lot of loved ones this year. In our very church, we have had, I don't know what the number would be, but it would be high, that have gone on to be with the Lord this year. What peace there is in reading this allegory that is truth from the Word of God, yet it is written in a different manner. Here and there, amidst the groves of bushes, there were ponds and lakes through which the countless streams of healing waters flowed until they emptied themselves into one great reservoir of sapphire blue waters. In these lakes and pools swam brilliantly colored fish like gorgeous living jewels, darting about between the carpets of water lilies. The whole scene was enchantingly beautiful, but perhaps the most delightful and healing thing of all was the lovely stillness and the calm which brooded over everything, for the whole mountain lay back in a little from another mountains, which shot in and protected it from the wind and the storms. It was so quiet there. Oh, it was only gradually the sound of murmuring streams became audible to the ear, and soft humming of the bees, and an occasional low note from some bird. A species of turtle dove which nested among the bushes of peace. When they reached the great reservoir, the king and his companions sat down on the bank above it, where they were on the very edge of the mountain, and could look straight down into the valley of humiliation, far below. Indeed, the king explained that the very shortest route between the valley and the high place was up the side of the mountain of Spikenard. But he added that the greatest storm and tempest, so common on the lower parts of the mountain, were generally strongest and most violent just below those very slopes, on which they sat. And at such time the rolling of the thunder could be heard quite plainly, and the lightning could be seen, rendering the clouds beneath but peace, yet not a breath of any raging tempest could invade the quiet valley of peace up there on the high place of the mountain. Whew. You know what this lady has discovered? She has discovered if you stay close to the peacemaker who lives up on the mountain, and you stay in that area in your life and don't go below that, you can live in the mountain of peace. You can be in that place. For some time the two of them sat perfect silent. Grace and glory sat perfect silent in that peace. Could not help comparing the deep rest and tranquility of that place, where the senses of stress and the tempest through which she had first struggled up to the high places, and also with the storms and the stresses in the lives of the inhabitants of the valley down there beneath them. She thought of so many of her relatives down there whose inner lives were tempest-tossed, tormented by fear and bitterness, by rage and envy, by covetousness, and by revelers and evils of all sorts. Then she began to think of all the sorrows and anguish of the heart endured by the multitudes in the cities of destruction, which lay not far from the valley of humiliation. On the shores of the great sea, she had recently visited the city with the king, and some of the things that she had seen and heard there seemed sacred upon her memory. Wow. She remembered too the passionate sorrow and the compassion felt by the king's workers in the great city, and the way in which they had seemed to feel themselves so at one with all of the degraded and miserable and destitute people among whom they labored, and how sometimes they said they were almost brought to despair by the suffering of all around them, and especially of their piety and distress over the innocent and the helpless little children born in an environment of evil and degradation, from which there could be no escape for them, in which they were doomed to be corrupted and brought into the even deeper evil and misery. Wow. Without the grace, without the Lord of glory visiting down there, without the Lord of grace and glory visiting in these places through you and I, they are in places of no hope. I saw as going through Ohio, rode down into a section where all the buildings have graffiti from great gangs that live there. The chances of being killed there are 100 to 1 that you won't leave there. If you go in there, you won't come back out. It'll be 100 to 1 that you ever came back out. These places are dens of what has happened to our people who are living in opposite from what this lady's writing about, are living down in that degradation. And as she thought of these things, Grace and Glory gave a little gasp It seemed to her that all the peace and beauty and love of that spot up there on the high place had become overshadowed, and that darkened, as though it were wrong for her to be sitting up there in the heavenly places, when down in the valley life was so cruel and so dreadful, different. What right had she to enjoy so much when so many others never had the least opportunity to share the same joys? Indeed, could not even know anything about the King of Love, by whose side she was sitting? Then she heard his voice speaking. It is right and blessed, grace and glory, that you being to be feeling something of anguish of the world's suffering, and to know that your own oneness with all of the blemished and spotted lives everywhere, to begin to understand at last, what it must mean to the heart of love himself, and to release that love can never rest until all evil is overcome and swallowed up in victory. Up here on the mountain of Spikenard, I would have you learn the truth that love can never rest until real peace which is perfect harmony with the law of love, is brought to the heart of all men everywhere. This is the impelling, insensitive, and motive for all witness and all ministry of love, in which you are being trained, for love must share with others or die. It must give to others all that is received, or it cannot remain. Love can only live in your heart as it propagates itself by sharing. Love is the constraining power which makes my lovers willing to go all lengths, even to death itself, in order to bring the good news of the love of God to those who have never heard it. It is love to the Lamb of God, who bears the sin of the world, and still must bear it and suffer with sinners, until even the sin-defiled creature turns at last from their sinning and seeks his delivering power. For as long as sin lasts and defiles the ruins his creatures, love cannot come down from his cross, nor cease to bear the sin of the world. Wow. When he finished, Spikenard, intense silence brooded up there on the mountain of Spikenard, as though all living things on the mountain knelt and trembled and worshipped. The king himself finally broke the silence as he began to sing. These were the words of the song which grace and glory heard, but no words can express the full meaning. Love is the Lord. He hears each cry. His grandness is great. A wounded heart will he pass by nor leave in desolation. For his love he stoops to be at one in all our misery. Love is the Lord. Love cast out fear. He breaketh all sin's chains. The mourn of the sick heart he hears, and feeleth all their pains. There is no wrong that men can do, but God's own Lamb must suffer too. Oh, understand it if you can. 'Tis love himself who pleads where in your wound a son of man, man's son of God, still bleeds. And not till sin is wholly slain can God's own heart be healed of pain. Wow. I'm telling you, God has given me a book in my hands right here that is probably one of the finest works of art any human being has ever penned. I was saved in 1972, and had I found this book then, or God had laid to me this book then, written in 1972, the year I was saved, I wouldn't have understood it. I have had to live through all 9 of these mountains that she talks about. I have had to live through all 9 of these spices she talks about. And now that I read it, I can see my life before my eyes in this little book. And this lady, she found out something. That God is all in all, and everything proceedeth from God. Everything proceedeth from God. If you should be a person who has never said, Jesus, forgive me of my sin, come into my heart and save my soul, you need to do that. To have the understanding of the writings of the Bible, or of a person that writes like this, who lived on the mountaintop with Jesus himself, who walked on that mountaintop. I know nothing of this lady, but I know in 73 I went to Jerusalem. And while I was there, our guide was a nun, and I don't remember her name. But I know she spoke of Jesus as the mountain to be on. I know she spoke of God as the one on the mountaintop. I know she spoke of grace and glory. I don't know if she was the woman that wrote this or not. But I know I met a woman in my life that portrayed all the points that are written in this little book. And God has allowed me to pass by many people since 1972 that have touched my life, that have showed me things that I need to be. I need to be the one that's dropping peace. I need to be the one that is all 9 of these mountains. I need to be the one that has the love. I need to be the one that has the joy. I need to be the one that has the peace. I need to be the one with the long suffering. I need to be the one with the gentleness. I need to be the one with the faith. I need to be the one with the meekness of heaven. I need to be the one with self-control. And I need to be the one that is last seen on the mountain of spices. When I'm last seen on this earth alive, I need to be seen on the mountain of spices, where the things of God grow. The pomegranates, the camphor, the sprinkard, the saffron, the carms, the cinnamon, the frankincense, the myrrh, the aloe, the love. The things that were brought to Jesus when he was in the manger. Those things represented the human side of man. It also represented the loveliness of the spiritual side of man. Well, our time has come and gone. It has certainly been a pleasure to read this little excerpt, this little allegory to you today. And I hope and pray that you'll take it to heart and you'll think about it. You find this book. Find it on the web. Mountains of Spices. Just take a picture of that right there and find it on the web. Order it. I wouldn't hesitate to say it would be worth $50. Though you can probably find it much, much cheaper. But I would get it if I were you, and I'd read it. We'll see you next time. This is Brother Peter. Bye-bye.